The Kroger on Millfield Road wasn't the kind of place where anything interesting happened. It was a Tuesday evening in late November. The kind of cold that got into your bones before you even realized it. And the store was half empty the way it always was after 6 o'clock. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. A holiday playlist, the same one they'd been running since Halloween, drifted through the speakers without anyone really listening. Joel Patton pushed his cart down the cereal aisle with one hand and held his 7-year-old son's hand with the other, which meant the cart kept drifting left and bumping softly into the shelving. He didn't bother correcting it. He was 38 years old and looked closer to 45. Not in a bad way, exactly, just in the way that certain kinds of hard work leave a mark. The permanent tension across the shoulders, the slight hesitation before sitting down like his body, was always calculating the cost of rest. He'd been on shift at the distribution center since 5 that morning, 13 hours ago. His feet were still in his work boots because he hadn't had time to go home first. He'd gotten a call from his son's aftercare that the boy had a stomachache and could someone come pick him up. And Joel had left straight from the loading dock. The stomachache had passed by the time Joel got there, apparently. His son, Tommy, was now inspecting a box of Cocoa Puffs with the focus of a scientist examining evidence. "We have cereal at home," Joel said. "We have the kind with the rooster on it. Corn flakes are good." Tommy looked at him with the specific expression of a 7-year-old who has been deeply personally wronged. "Dad." Joel almost laughed. He put the Cocoa Puffs in the cart. It was small things like that. The ability to still make each other laugh. The way Tommy reached for his hand without being asked. That kept Joel moving forward, when forward didn't feel like it had much to offer. His wife, Renee, had passed 2.5 years ago. Ovarian cancer caught too late, gone in 8 months from diagnosis to the end. Tommy had been 4. Old enough to understand something terrible had happened. Too young to hold on to any real memory of her face without a photograph to help him. Joel managed. He had his mother 3 days a week for aftercare, a decent landlord who hadn't raised rent in 2 years. And a job that paid enough. Just enough. If nothing went wrong. The problem with just enough was that something always went wrong. Last month it was the transmission on the truck. The month before that, Tommy had needed a dentist visit that the insurance only half covered. Joel kept a small notebook in his jacket pocket with his monthly expenses laid out in columns. Not because he was organized by nature but because he couldn't afford to be anything else. They worked their way through the store slowly. Bread, milk, a rotisserie chicken because it was cheaper than buying the parts separately, and Tommy would eat it without complaint. A bag of apples, 2 cans of soup for the nights Joel got home too late to cook anything real. At the end of the dairy aisle, Joel paused. There was a woman standing in front of the yogurt section, not browsing, not reaching for anything, just standing. She was maybe 32 or 33. Wearing a gray fleece jacket that wasn't quite warm enough for November. Her dark hair pulled back in a way that suggested she'd put it up hours ago and forgotten about it. She was holding a small container of strawberry yogurt in both hands, and looking at it the way people look at things when they're doing math in their head. Beside her, holding onto the sleeve of her jacket, was a little girl, maybe 5 years old. Blonde curls, a purple coat with a broken zipper that she was absently fiddling with. The girl wasn't looking at the yogurt, she was looking at the rotisserie chicken in Joel's cart. Not a greedy look. Not the kind of look kids give when they want something and know how to perform wanting it. It was quieter than that. It was the kind of look that came from a real place, and Joel recognized it because he'd seen it before, on Tommy's face, during a stretch about 18 months ago when things had gotten genuinely bad. A week when Joel had stretched a box of pasta and a jar of sauce across 5 dinners and told Tommy that eating simple was something special people did. The woman put the yogurt back on the shelf. She did it carefully, with both hands, like she was returning something fragile. Then she took a slow breath, straightened up, and reached for her daughter's hand. "Come on, Bea," she said quietly. The little girl, Bea, looked up at her mother, then back at the chicken in Joel's cart one more time, then let herself be led away toward the front of the store. Joel stood there for a moment. He knew it wasn't his business. He knew that people had their privacy and their pride. And that strangers didn't always want to be seen. Especially not in the moments when they were putting something back on a shelf. He'd been on the receiving end of that himself, the specific embarrassment of being noticed at the wrong time, and he hadn't always appreciated it. But the little girl's face stayed with him. He turned his cart around. They were at the checkout, the self-checkout lane at the far end, where the woman was placing items on the belt one at a time, with the careful precision of someone who already knew the total before the machine did. Joel could see what was there. A small loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, 2 cans of beans, a box of crackers, a bunch of bananas. She was watching the screen with her arms crossed over her chest, not in an unfriendly way, just braced. Bea was standing beside her, still fiddling with the broken zipper on her coat. Joel stopped a few feet away. He wasn't sure what he was going to say. He hadn't planned anything. Tommy was beside him, having transferred his interest from the Cocoa Puffs to a display of travel-sized hand sanitizers near the register, which Joel was choosing not to address right now. "Excuse me," he said. The woman looked up immediately, the way people do when they're already on alert. Her eyes were dark and careful. "Sorry," Joel said quickly. "I didn't mean to interrupt." She waited. He hadn't planned this. He was aware of that. He said the first honest thing he could find. "I saw your daughter looking at the chicken in my cart. I've got a whole one. We won't eat it all tonight." He paused. "I just thought, if you wanted it." The woman's expression didn't change right away. It moved through several things in quick succession. Surprise, then something, guarded, then something that might have been embarrassment if embarrassment had a harder edge to it. "We're fine," she said. "Thank you." It was polite, final, the kind of answer that was designed to close a door. Joel nodded. "Okay." He started to turn away. Then Bea said, "Mama, I'm really hungry." She didn't say it to be difficult. She said it the way kids say true things, plainly without any understanding of timing. She was looking at her mother with complete trust, the way children look at parents when they believe the parent will simply fix whatever is wrong. The woman closed her eyes for just a second. When she opened them, they were bright in a way that had nothing to do with happiness. "I know, baby," she said softly. "We're almost done." Joel didn't say anything. He reached into his cart, took out the rotisserie chicken in its plastic container, and set it gently on the belt behind the woman's groceries. "It's already paid for," he said. Which wasn't true yet, but would be in about 4 minutes. "I'll just grab another one. The store's not closing for a while." The woman turned and looked at the chicken, then at him. "You don't have to do that. I know, we don't take." She stopped. Started again. "I don't want my daughter thinking she can just." "She didn't ask for anything," Joel said. "She just looked. Kids do that." He glanced at Tommy, who had picked up a hand sanitizer shaped like a Christmas tree, and was examining it with professional seriousness. "Mine does it all the time." The woman looked at Tommy, then back at Joel. Something in her face shifted slightly, like a door opening 1 inch instead of staying shut. "This is really unnecessary," she said, but the certainty had gone out of it. "My name's Joel," he said. "This is Tommy." Tommy looked up and gave a small wave without putting down the Christmas tree hand sanitizer. "We're just 2 people finishing up grocery shopping on a Tuesday, that's all this is." She held his gaze for a moment longer. Then, quietly as if the word cost her something, "Nadine. Nice to meet you, Nadine." Bea had already climbed up onto the little metal shelf at the base of the self-checkout machine, and was peering over the belt at the rotisserie chicken with an expression of focused hope. That was almost too much to look at directly. Joel paid for both orders. Nadine started to object again when she saw what he was doing, and he said, "Let me finish, then you can be annoyed at me." And something about the delivery of it, flat, tired, not trying to be charming, just honest, made her stop arguing. When the receipt printed, she took it from the machine and stood holding it with both hands. "Thank you," she said. The simplicity of it, the way she said it without looking at him, told him it was real. "You're welcome." They pushed their carts toward the exit together, without quite deciding to. The automatic doors slid open and the cold came in all at once. In the parking lot, under the orange lights, Joel noticed the car immediately. It was a 2003 Honda Accord, the kind of car that had given everything it had to give, and then kept going anyway because no one could afford to replace it. One of the rear taillights was covered with red tape instead of plastic. The back seat, visible through the window, had a folded sleeping bag in it, and a duffel bag, and a plastic bin with a lid, and a backpack with a soccer ball keychain hanging from the zipper. He understood what he was looking at. Nadine was loading her bags into the trunk with practiced efficiency, not looking at him, having already filed the interaction away as finished. Bea was at her side, holding one of the plastic bags and dragging it more than carrying it. Joel stood by his truck for a moment. Tommy had gotten in and was already working on the seatbelt. He thought about all the reasons to get in the truck and go home. He was exhausted. He had work tomorrow. He didn't know this woman. She had managed to make it very clear she wasn't looking for more help than she'd already been given, and he respected that. He thought about the notebook in his jacket pocket with the columns of numbers, and he thought about the way Nadine had put the yogurt back on the shelf with both hands. He walked back across the parking lot. "Nadine." She looked up from the trunk. He said it plainly because plain was the only way he knew how to say things. It's going to get down to 28 tonight. The heat advisory is out. He paused. I have a couch. It's nothing special. But it's warm, and it's a real couch, and you and your daughter would be safe. She stared at him. I know how this sounds, he added. It sounds like something a poor person says right before something terrible happens, she said. I know. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet, took out a business card from the distribution center, his name and work number on it, and held it out to her. Call the number on that tomorrow morning and ask for Joel. They'll confirm I work there. I've got a neighbor who'd sit on her porch and watch you drive away if anything felt wrong. And I'll give you her number too before you park. He paused again. But also, if you just want to say no, that's completely fine. I'll get in my truck. Nadine took the card. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at Bia, who had stopped fighting the plastic bag and was leaning against the car, her small face tilted up at the sky the way children look at things that are just there, cold air and parking lot lights and whatever came next. One night, Nadine said finally. We'd be gone early. That's fine. And if anything feels off, we leave. Yes. She nodded once, like a decision being locked into place. Okay. Joel's apartment was 12 minutes from the Kroger. 2 bedrooms, a galley kitchen, carpet in the living room that had seen better decades. He gave Tommy a bath, and got him into pajamas and explained briefly that they had guests, for the night, 2 people from the store, who needed somewhere warm, to sleep, and Tommy said okay with the easy acceptance of a child who had been raised by a parent, who treated basic kindness as unremarkable. Nadine and Bia came in carrying their duffel bag and the backpack with the soccer ball keychain. Joel made them tea because it was the thing he knew how to make quickly, and because it gave everyone something to do with their hands. He pulled out the extra blankets from the hall closet. He opened the couch out into a bed and found sheets that matched, approximately. Bia ate half of the rotisserie chicken, sitting at the kitchen table with Tommy. The 2 of them making serious work of it, while the adults stood in the doorway with their mugs and didn't say much. At one point Tommy pulled a drumstick apart and handed Bia half without being asked, and she took it without saying anything, and they went back to eating. Later, when the kids were asleep, Bia on the pullout, Tommy in his room. Joel and Nadine sat at the kitchen table with the last of the tea. She told him some of it. Not all of it, but enough. She'd been working as a dental hygienist's assistant in Columbus. Her landlord had sold the building to a developer 8 months ago, and everyone in the building had 30 days to find somewhere else to go, in a rental market that had nothing available in their price range and nowhere near as much time as it would have taken to find it. She'd looked. She'd had savings, not much, but some. And she'd spent most of them on the first 2 months of a new apartment that turned out to have a mold problem that made Bia sick. And then there'd been the cost of the doctor, and then she'd lost the apartment when she couldn't make the 3rd month's rent, and then one thing and another, the way things went when the margin was already thin. There was a point, she said, wrapping both hands around her mug, where I thought I was managing it. Like I kept thinking I was one thing away from being okay. And then I got one thing away from okay, and it turned out there was another thing behind it. Joel nodded. He knew that feeling. He had lived inside that feeling. How long? He asked. 11 weeks, she said. 11 weeks in that car. 11 weeks of finding parking lots that were safe enough, rest stops on the interstate, a church parking lot in Reynoldsburg that hadn't asked questions, finding bathrooms, finding warmth, making the whole thing seem normal enough to be, that B mostly treated it as an adventure, because 5-year-olds were remarkably adaptable when the alternative was falling apart. And Nadine hadn't let herself fall apart. She thinks we're camping, Nadine said. Her voice was flat when she said it. The flatness of someone describing something without letting themselves feel it fully. I told her it was winter camping. She believed me. Joel didn't say anything for a moment. She's going to need better boots, he said eventually. Nadine looked at him. For the camping, he said. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh, surprised out of her, clearly against her will. She pressed her lips together for a second and looked at the table. Yeah, she said. Probably. In the morning Joel was up at 5. He made coffee and put a box of cereal on the table, the good kind, not the rooster kind, and wrote down 3 things on a piece of paper before Nadine was awake. The number for the Franklin County Emergency Housing Assistance Office. The address of a legal aid organization that handled tenant rights and could sometimes help with rental application fees. And the name and number of his dental hygienist, who he was almost certain had mentioned looking for an assistant at her practice 3 months ago, and who he was going to call on his break that morning to find out if that was still the case. He left the paper under the coffee mug. He was putting on his jacket when Nadine came out of the living room in yesterday's clothes. Her hair down now, looking slightly less guarded than the night before the way people do after sleeping in a real bed. She saw the paper. She picked it up and read it. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then the hygienist thing, I don't know if it's still open, he said. I'm going to find out. No promises. You didn't have to do all this. I know. She looked at the paper again, then at him. Why? It was a real question, not ungrateful, genuinely wanting to understand. Joel thought about it honestly before answering. About 2.5 years ago, he said, my wife passed. And I had a 4-year-old and a job I wasn't sure I could keep, and I didn't know how any of it was going to work. He zipped his jacket. A lot of people helped me. People who didn't have to. People who had their own problems. He picked up his keys. I figured I'd been carrying that a while, felt like time to put some of it down. Nadine held his gaze. I'm sorry about your wife, she said. Thank you. Bea appeared in the doorway of the living room then, her blonde curls completely wild, dragging the purple coat with the broken zipper. She looked around the kitchen with the evaluating look of a child taking inventory of a new place. Is there cereal? She asked. Yes, Joel said. The good kind. Bea accepted this information and sat down at the table with the complete composure of someone who had long since learned to take good things as they came and not ask too many questions. Joel's neighbor, Phyllis, who was 67, semi-retired, and spent a lot of time on her front porch regardless of the season, had been watching the parking lot situation with interest ever since Joel mentioned having guests. She materialized at the door around 7:30, ostensibly to return a casserole dish she'd borrowed in September, and ended up sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, while Nadine and the girls ate breakfast. By 8 o'clock, Phyllis had gotten Nadine's full story, expressed opinions about the Franklin County housing system that were pointed and accurate, and offered the use of her landline for any calls that needed to be made without burning through a phone plan. Joel called from his truck on the way to work. His dental hygienist, a woman named Carla Briggs, who had been cleaning his teeth for 4 years and who was one of the most reliably practical people he knew, picked up on the second ring. He explained the situation concisely. She was quiet for a moment. She has experience? Carla said. That's what she told me. 2 years as an assistant in Columbus. Another pause. Have her call me today. Dr. Hennessy has been on me for a month to find someone. I can't make any promises, but I can get her in front of the right person. Joel thanked her and hung up and drove the rest of the way to work. What he found out later, pieced together from what Nadine told him over the following weeks, and from what Phyllis reported with no small amount of satisfaction, was that Nadine had called Carla Briggs from Phyllis's landline at 9:15 that morning. She had an interview with Dr. Hennessy's office by Thursday. She got the job the following Monday. The emergency housing office was slower, as those things were, but Phyllis had apparently accompanied Nadine to the appointment in person, and had sat next to her, with the energy of someone who had been waiting for an opportunity to apply her full attention to a bureaucratic system, and the combination of Nadine's situation and Phyllis's focused presence had moved things along considerably. They found a transitional housing placement within the week. Not perfect, a studio on the east side that was small and had radiator heat that clanged all night, but it was a real address, a real door with a lock, and Bea could stop winter camping. Joel didn't see them again for 6 weeks, which was fine. He didn't expect anything. He'd done what he'd done because it needed doing, not because he was keeping a ledger. Then one Saturday morning in January there was a knock at his door. Nadine was standing on the porch in a new coat. Not expensive but warm, clearly purchased with some intention. And Bea was beside her in boots, real winter boots, her curls contained under a knit hat, with a pom-pom on it that she was touching every few seconds to confirm it was still there. Nadine was holding a casserole dish. Phyllis's, she said. She said you borrowed it and forgot to return it. Joel looked at the dish. I've never borrowed Phyllis's casserole dish in my life. That's what I figured. The corner of Nadine's mouth moved. She made us bring it anyway. Tommy appeared at Joel's elbow, assessed the situation, and looked at Bea. Do you want to see my Legos? Bea looked at her mother, who nodded, and they disappeared into the apartment. Nadine held out the dish. I wanted to come say thank you, in person. Not just a text. You didn't have to, I know. She paused. The job is good. It's really good. Dr. Hennessy is, she's a good person. And the apartment is small, but Bea has her own corner with her stuff in it and she thinks she's really happy about it. She stopped. Seemed to be deciding something. I've been thinking about that night a lot. In the parking lot, yeah. I almost didn't take the card, she said. I was going to get in the car and go. I know. I don't know why I didn't. Joel thought about that. About the small distances between decisions. About all the moments where things could go one way or another based on something as thin as whether a person looked up at the right time, or said a thing plainly instead of trying to make it sound like less than it was. "I'm glad you didn't," he said. She looked at him for a moment steadily. "Me too." From inside the apartment came the sound of Legos being sorted with intense focus and Bee's voice, higher than Tommy's, saying something about a tower and Tommy saying something back that made her laugh. Nadine looked toward the sound. Her face, in that moment, was the face of someone who had put something down that they'd been carrying for a very long time. Joel took the casserole dish. "You want coffee?" he asked, she said. "I'd really like that." 3 months after that, Nadine found out that the woman 2 doors down from her in the transitional housing building had been sleeping in her car too. Different reasons, same outcome. And she knocked on the door and introduced herself and sat with her for an hour and told her about the housing assistant's office and offered to go with her to the appointment. Because she had learned that sometimes the only thing that moved the needle was having someone sit next to you who had already been through the door. She went. They got the appointment. The woman found a placement 4 weeks later. Nadine called Joel to tell him. He was in his truck in the parking lot of the distribution center on his lunch break, eating a sandwich he'd made that morning with the last of the bread. He listened to the whole thing, and when she was done he said, "That's really good, Nadine." "I just kept thinking," she said, "if you hadn't stopped. But I did. You didn't have to." "I know." There was a pause on the line, comfortable the way silences get between people who have moved past the part where silence needs filling. "I've been thinking," Nadine said, "about what you said that morning. About carrying something and putting it down. Yeah, I think I get it now." Outside the truck, the parking lot was gray and cold and completely ordinary, the kind of place where nothing interesting happened. Joel finished the last of his sandwich and watched a shopping cart drift slowly across the asphalt and bump softly into the curb. "It doesn't take much," he said. "That's the thing. It really doesn't take much." And that was true. It had started with a chicken in a cart, and a little girl's face, and one person deciding to turn his cart around instead of going home. That was all. That was the whole beginning of it. Sometimes that's how things change. Not with a plan or a program or a perfect moment. Just one person, tired and ordinary, in a fluorescent-lit grocery store on a Tuesday night, deciding that what they saw in front of them was worth stopping for. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who still believes that small things matter. Subscribe to Real Goodness for more stories about the everyday kindness that doesn't make the news, but changes, lives all the same.